Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shukaib Arif, and I will be your host today. I would like to welcome you on behalf of Al-Mawrid US. Topic of our Q&A session today is celebrating Halloween and other non-Muslim holidays, festivals, and celebrations. The scholar answering our questions today is Dr. Abdullah Rahim. He is joining us from UK. For those of us who may not be familiar with Dr. Rahim, I will briefly introduce him to you. He is an associate fellow with Al-Mawrid Foundation for Islamic Research and Education. He is also a trustee of the Al-Mawrid UK country chapter. Dr. Rahim's main area of research is the interpretation of the Quran. Among other things, he also runs an online Q&A service through the Exploring Islam website. This website can be accessed by going to exploring-islam.com. He is currently finishing his second PhD on the subject of comparative study of approaches to interpretation of the Quran. For a complete bio of Dr. Rahim, please visit his website, exploring-islam.com. Before we begin our Q&A session, few housekeeping announcements. The Q&A session will essentially focus on our topic today. However, Dr. Rahim will also take any general questions about Islam as well. This session will primarily be in the English language. Dr. Rahim will only be able to answer questions in English. However, if you would like to ask a question in Urdu, Hindi, then please feel free to do so. I will translate and ask the question in English on your behalf. You can ask a question in one of two ways. You can either use the raise hand feature on your screen, or you can type your question and I will ask your question on your behalf. Please try to keep your questions brief so we can take as many questions as possible. So without any further delay, we will now begin our Q&A session. I will begin by asking the first question and then we'll open it up to everyone else. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Rahim.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Dr. Rahim, being a parent living in a non-Muslim society, I am not alone in my quest to raise my kids as good Muslim. Around me, I see Muslim parents developing various coping mechanisms to adapt to their surroundings. There are differences in interpretations of how a Muslim should conduct him or herself in such societies, and how different they should be from followers of the other religions. The real difficulties in child raising surface when children start attending daycare or reach their school years. Many parents are left to their own devices when it comes to dealing with the Halloween, Christmas, or Easter activities that are sometimes heavily embedded into school programs here in the US. Proponents of "they are just kids" school argue that these celebrations have been very much commercialized now and are very secular in nature. There is hardly any hint of religiosity at school and in society in general. They do not find it problematic to let Muslim children go trick-or-treating or sitting on Santa's lap in the shopping mall asking for gifts, singing hymns about Christmas in school chorus as part of year-end celebrations, or giving an egg hunt, going an egg hunt on the Easter day. They point out that these celebrations are mostly about dressing up, receiving and giving gifts, and they are essentially children's stuff. Some other counter this by saying that this attitude ignores the fundamental reasons why these events take place, reminds that the duty of a Muslim is to be distinguished as a Muslim with his or her conduct and appearance, and question how our children will develop as a Muslim identity if their celebrations are shunned by festivities of other religions. In support of this position, we also frequently hear this hadith that whoever imitates a people is one of them, as reported by Imam Ahmad and in Tirmizi. So my question to you is, what are the guiding principles we are to follow in light of Quran and Sunnah? How should a Muslim family like mine approach these matters? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to share my views with you. When you were explaining this issue for me and this question, a number of interesting statements and sentences were within this question, which of course I know you drafted in detail in order to initiate this discussion. So I just want to first comment on some of these statements very briefly before trying to answer the question, and then hopefully open up to further questions and answers on this subject or any other subject on religion. So one of the sentences that you said was how different Muslims should be from followers of other religions, or in fact, in what way should they be different from the followers of other religions. It is very good if when we hear these sentences to think about it a bit and try to be accurate. What do we mean by these things? So for instance, Jews also believe in one God. Christians also in principle do believe in one God. Do I want to be different from them in that sense? Of course not. I want to be very similar to them in that sense, because as a Muslim I also believe in one God. This being different that we are talking about, I think in the terminology of the Quran, the only close thing that we can find to it is the expression that says فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. In Surah Al-Ma'idah, when God says, the Almighty, that every nation had their own ways and their own sharia, then it says فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. So compete with each other. Compete with each other in khairat, in good things. So I think if we try to be different from the followers of religion, should be the way that we want to be different from them. We should be better than them in being in the path of God. Then there was another sentence: the duty of a Muslim is to be distinguished as a Muslim with his or her conduct and appearance. Again, this is something very interesting, and that relates again to that other thing that brother said, Muslim identity. What is really Muslim identity? Let us think about this. What is exactly Muslim identity? It seems to me that when we say Muslim identity, to some of our brothers and friends, Muslim identity refers to the appearance of a Muslim. So have a long beard, perhaps having a long dress like the dress that are wear in Arabia. Perhaps that is Muslim identity. I wouldn't call that a Muslim identity, because if you go to Malaysia, for instance, the way that they dress is totally different, and it is still, I would say, a very modest dress. If you go to Pakistan, the way that their dress is different from some Arabian countries. If you go to any other Muslim country, they have their own ways of dressing. Even in terms of beard, as you know, we have some fantastic reciters of the Quran that never had a long beard. Abdullah being one of them. So what is really this Muslim identity? And what does it mean to be distinguished and different from others? Is it just about the fashion and the way that we look, or is it something more than that? I believe it is about something more than that. So I try to bring this to a very harsh, realistic example. I would say the way that we Muslims can distinguish ourselves from others, in particular in a non-Muslim country, for instance, could be to be law-obedient citizens. Okay? So if I do not escape tax, if I try to follow the law, if I tell the truth, that is the way that I distinguish myself from others. That I would consider to be my Muslim identity. And then, of course, that is part of being in the path of God. Of course, prayers, fasting, all of that is added to this. But the basis, the foundation is this. Being a good human being. Sometimes we talk about Muslim as if Muslim is one thing and then human being is a different thing. This is not the way that I see it. To me, being a good human being means to be a good Muslim. And being a good Muslim means to be a good human being. So I would consider being distinguished from others to be being that good human being. Somebody who everybody looks at him, Muslim or non-Muslim, as a role model. This is what I consider to be being distinguished and Muslim identity. Now, closer to what the question was about, there's another thing I would like to say. There seems to be this mindset and understanding that for everything we need to decide whether it is in the category of halal or haram. And anything that we consider to be not quite what a Muslim should do, we immediately put the label of haram on that. I want to say this is very dangerous. Haram is what Allah, God the Almighty, has announced that haram. It is in the Quran. We do not have any authority to consider anything haram if it is not in the Quran, if it is not mentioned in the Quran. And yes, we have hadith of the Prophet, but as far as I have seen, every hadith of Prophet about haram and halal is simply application of the Quran, expansion of the Quran. This is not like volume 1 and volume 2. All of it is together. So I want to say this to you, and I think many Muslim scholars agree with that. To announce something that is permissible, haram, by mistake, is more horrible and terrible than announcing something that is haram, halal, by mistake. What is the reason? Because if something is haram and by mistake we call it halal, most that is happening is that unintentionally people are doing something wrong, and God is forgiving. God will forgive them if by mistake we do something. But if something is halal and by mistake we call it haram, we are disfiguring the image of religion. Religion that was supposed to be for everybody. A religion that was supposed to make sense. We are making this image a wrong image. That is a terrible thing to do. So my suggestion is that unless somebody can give me a verse of the Quran or a sahih hadith of the Prophet that says Halloween is haram, let's not talk about halal and haram here. Let's talk about appropriate or inappropriate. This, understanding this, appreciating this, believe me, will solve 80% of the problem. So it is not about halal and haram. It is whether it is appropriate or if it is not appropriate. Yes, if Halloween today was still a pagan ritual, meaning people would intentionally, deliberately do things to celebrate Satan and to celebrate idols and I don't know, pagan things, if this was really what was happening in Halloween, then yeah, it is definitely haram, because we know that shirk is haram. So no question about that. You know and I know, and I think everybody knows, that the Halloween that we see today is simply, you know, it's just a festival. I mean, I don't think even people who attended have any idea what is the roots of this festival. Okay, so we cannot say it is haram. We cannot put it in the category of haram. Then comes the next part. Is it appropriate or is it not appropriate? And that will make the job of you as parents, me as a student of Islam, easier. Because then that means instead of worrying that maybe my kid is going through hellfire, we can just consider, you know, what does hikmah, what does wisdom tells me, okay? Should I allow my kid to participate in this, or should I not allow my kid? What would be the consequences of allowing him to participate? What will be the consequences of not allowing him to participate? I will talk more practically about this in a minute. But let me also say another thing. It is very interesting, brothers and sisters, that, for instance, parents are very worried sometimes, okay, that kids, oh, my kid, he wants to attend Christmas party, he wants to attend Halloween, you know, what should we do? This is against Islam, etc., etc. The same parents, the same ones, participate in celebrating Eid al-Milad, the birthday of the Prophet. Now, in my understanding, you cannot say Halloween is bid'ah, because definition of bid'ah, innovation, is when you do something, just act, consider religion. This will become bid'ah. If you consider it as part of the corpus of religion that was given to you by God and the Prophet, this will become bid'ah. Halloween is not that. But if celebrating the birthday of the Prophet, I think you can consider it bid'ah, because you are adding something to the body of religion, you consider it to be religious, you label it with rewards, etc. So I, as a father, myself participate in Milad al-Nabi, which is bid'ah, which is following the same mistakes that Ahl al-Kitab had. And then I'm worried about my son, who in a very innocent way, once a year, maybe during 2 or 3 years of his life, when he's very young, just wants to experience Halloween. So I don't see quite a good balance here. We need to come back to our senses and to understand really what is right and what is wrong. So let me now come to a more practical part of this. So, okay, so let's say we agree with what I'm saying. Let's talk about appropriate and inappropriate. So is it appropriate or is it inappropriate? This is where I think every parent needs to decide what is best for his children. I will tell you what I think, but I cannot stress enough to say every parent needs to decide for his own child what is the best thing, okay? You may have a kid that you know that if you tell him, look, you know, I really don't think you should participate in this. Don't say it is haram. You cannot say that. But you can say, I don't think it is appropriate for you to participate in this, you know, the things that they are doing is not very nice, etc., etc. And in a way, the kid respects you and does not participate in these things, and he doesn't mind. He's okay. It could be one, this can be one scenario. The second scenario could be that you say the same thing to your kid. He becomes very disappointed. He considered this to be one of the limitations that his religion is bringing to him, remains in his mind as a bad memory, and become one of the many reasons that later on, when he gets to the age of 20 something, decides to not really follow the religion of Islam, because to him, this is a religion that does not allow you to have fun. I always say to my friends that what is important for me is to make sure that when my kid gets to the age of 40, he's still a good Muslim. That is my objective. Not that whether just now, at the age of 14, he's a good Muslim or not. So all of these things need to be considered. Let me bring this to a bit of more personal level. In Britain, Halloween is not celebrated as intensive as I think in America. Here it is only just one, and it's not such a big deal. Not many people do it anyway. Around 5 years ago, my son wanted to participate in this. What I told him was that I said, if you want to participate, that's fine, but I personally don't like to be in your place, because I don't like to have scary face and violent images and things like that. I don't find the whole thing attractive, but if you want to participate, that's fine. He participated. He found it very interesting. The year after also he participated. He found it even more interesting. The year after, he did not even mention it. He was past that stage. Did that have any effect on him? No. Not so. Nothing. No effect on him. Nothing. And he's now doing other normal things. I'm just thinking, just like an example that I gave you, if I had said to him that, nope, you cannot participate, what would have been the effect? This is what my concern is. Now, the thing about Halloween is that unlike some of the other celebrations, now I'm not really expert in these celebrations, so I hope I don't get it wrong, but as far as I understand, for instance, Valentine's Day, it seems to be something nice in terms of having, helping others, showing love to your. Even Christmas seems to be something like a joyful occasion. Halloween, because of the roots that it has, and again I say today, I don't think anyone cares about those roots. The things that are being done, to me, are not in line with the nature of a healthy mindset. As simple as that. This is the way that I put it forward to my kid. This is the way that I will talk about it for my kid. I don't need to spend from my religion for everything. This is the message that I try to deliver tonight. Don't spend from your religion for every detail in terms of educating your kids. Remember that the foundations of our religion are simply what is natural, what is on the basis of morals, what is something that the intellect will accept it. It is on this basis that I think we can share our thoughts with kids, not in order to stop them from going. I would still say leave it to them, but let them know what you think about it. And also let them know that, it's my suggestion, of course, everybody knows better, but my suggestion is let them know that if they participate in it, you won't be disappointed with them. You will even ask them later how it goes, how it went, and tell me the stories, and let's talk about it. But just to show your understanding, if you share that understanding with me, that by nature it does not seem to be something quite nice to have a scary face, etc., etc. That is one thing to do. The other thing to do is, instead of preventing, I would like to use the word preparing. You see, if we develop a life for our children, in which they consider themselves to be in the path of God, in their own limited capacity as children, if they see their parents that are doing the same thing in the path of God, if they find the environment of the house to be something as good as a mosque in terms of purity, etc., then we have prepared a nice environment, a nice spiritual environment for our kids. Now, if we prepare that, then I wouldn't worry much about approaching of Halloween, because Either he decides not to participate in it, he doesn't find himself interested in it, or he will participate, but he's not going to get any sort of effects from that. It's just some sort of socializing for him and nothing more. I'm sure there are going to be many questions, so let me also talk about that hadith that brother mentioned, and then I will hear your questions. So this hadith, unfortunately, people take it out of the context. Let me read the complete hadith for you. If I think I have it somewhere. Yeah. So the complete hadith. See, the part that people narrate and quote is this part. من تشبه بقوم فهو منهم. Whoever makes himself similar to another group, another people, he is one of them. Any person with a bit of interest for research will ask himself, this does not seem to be a complete sentence. This does not seem to be a full statement of the Prophet. There should be something before that, or maybe something after that. There should be a context for this. Then such person will go and research this hadith, and if he does that, then he will find the full context. So this is the full context, as we have it in, for instance, Musnad Ahmad, number 5114. So it says, بُعِثْتُ بَيْنَ يَدَيِ الصَّايَ بِالسَّيْفِ حَتَّى يُعْبَدُ اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَجُعِلَ رِزْقِي تَحْتَ ظِلِّ الرُّمْحِ وَجُعِلَ الذِّلَّةُ وَالصَّغَارُ عَلَى مَنْ خَالَفَ وَمَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. So the translation goes something like this, that I was sent with my sword, meaning to fight people so that they accept and appreciate what they really believe in it, what they are convinced about. That is, there is only one God, and there is no partners with that God. And my blessing is تحت ظل الرمح, is with my spear. وجعل الذلة والصغار على من خالف أمري. So humiliation is with anyone who goes against me. So see, this is the Prophet announcing the fact that as a stage of his mission, he is in the position to go and fight with people, which is mushrikeen, and those Ahl al-Kitab in Arabia who were their enemies and who were rejecting the message of truth, although they knew it was truth. So this is the messenger saying, we are going to fight with these people. It's announcement of war. Then it says, وَمَنْ تَشَبَّهَ بِقَوْمٍ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. So remember, whoever looks like somebody, he is one of them. One of the issues that was happening during the wars and battles at the time of the Prophet, as the Quran also indirectly refers to it, was the fact that people would fight with each other, either in the battlefield or even individuals fighting with individuals, and sometimes by mistake a Muslim would kill a Muslim. Okay? And what the Prophet seems to be saying here is that if you look like a group, like if you look like your enemies, then you are one of them. So which means that if by mistake people brought object about it, you cannot complain about it because it is your fault that look like one of them. So again, if you look at the context of the hadith, the meaning of hadith will become very clear. So I'm happy to listen to any questions now.
Thank you for your answer. Fareen, you have a question? You can go ahead.
Thank you. I have a two-part question. Can you comment on whether it is acceptable to eat something that is offered to a Hindu god and is preyed upon? Typically, in Hindu festivals, sweets are put as offerings to gods and then distributed to friends. The other part of my question is, another way that Hindus provide sweets on their festivals to friends that may be Muslim is to purchase sweet boxes and distribute to friends who may be Muslim. If these have not been offerings to their gods and are mere gifts, even if they represent gifts related to these festivals, can we as Muslims consume them?
If it is just something that relates to festivals but is not offered to gods, then I don't think there is anything wrong with consuming it. However, if it is explicitly offered to gods, then unfortunately that is exactly, as far as I understand, one of the cases of what the Quran talks about, أُحِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ, which means that when it was slaughtered with the name of other than God. Of course, that is about meat, but I think the same principle also applies to non-meat material as well, like chocolates. The law of halal and haram is one thing that we need to make sure we fulfill. Akhlaq is also another thing that we need to make sure that we fulfill. So if a Hindu with all good intentions as a friend offers me something, smiles at me and say, please have some of this chocolate, etc., I won't be able to have it if I know that it is offered to their gods, but I will not do it in a way that would be considered as disrespectful to that person. I will find a way to do it in a way that I will not hurt his feelings. I wouldn't mind even explicitly later tell him what is the reason that I cannot have it, but the way that I will do it, I will think a lot on how to do it so that I will not offend him. These are two different things. Informing him about why I cannot have it is one thing. Offending him is another thing. That is not necessary. I mean, offending. So again, to summarize, if it is explicitly offered for gods, I think it is one of the applications, one of the similarities to what we have in the Quran, أُحِلَّ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ, that is for meat, but I think that applies to any other food. If it is just part of the festival, I don't think there is any problem with that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. I have a question from Sarim Siddiqui, and I'll just read it out to you. The fact that people are not aware of the roots of Halloween does not change what is being celebrated. So, for example, a theoretical fire-worshipping festival changed to a point where people aren't aware what they are doing. Can you, as a Muslim, join them in their celebration, fully knowing what that festival is about, worshipping fire?
Yes, I can. That is my answer. Because, see, brother, halal and haram and sharia of God, it is not about a scientific article. It is not about trying to understand what was the root of something, and because the root of it is this, so I'm going to avoid it. It is not about that. When something is haram, when something is forbidden, it is because the effect that it will have on your religion and with your relationship with God. If I know that what these people are celebrating are idols, if I know that all these 20 people that are clapping hands and singing music, these are all idol worshippers or Satan worshippers, I shouldn't be there. I shouldn't even be close to them. No question about that. But if that is not in their mind, what happened 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago or 200 years ago, as long as it does not have effect on these people and they don't do that thing, it really doesn't matter. God looks at hearts of people. God looks at intentions. God is not like my PhD supervisor who wants to find the origins of words and origins of concepts and origins of theories. That is not the God that I know from the Quran. There is one thing. There is one thing, and that might be something that maybe my heart shares something with what the brother said. There is one thing, and that does not apply to kids. I don't think that will apply to kids. That applies to you and me. You and I are such devoted servants of God. I'm not just saying Muslims. Let's not make it very sectarian. If we are such devoted servants of God, our thought is always with God. We love God. Whenever we read the Quran, whenever we even think about God, our heart starts to shake. Then we may find it not very comfortable to attend such celebration. Not because it is haram, not because it will affect us, because we love God so much, knowing that the root of this celebration was something that God didn't like. That would be enough for us to not participate in it. But see, brother, this can be your preference. This can be my preference. We cannot impose that to our kids. Compare this with doing Salat al-Tahajjud. Can I impose to my kid to do Salat al-Tahajjud? No. But I can do it. You can do it. So I do share, brother, something that you said, and that is yes. Me, myself, and I'm sure that's exactly the same for you and many other brothers and sisters. We have so much passion in our hearts about God, etc., that even if we know that 1,000 years ago in this place people were worshipping Satan, or 1,000 years ago people used to do such and such thing in worshipping Satan, even if it is 1,000 years ago, still we don't want to be there. Still we don't want to do the same thing. This is not coming from law. This is come from love, L-O-V-E. This comes from hope, haba. This is coming from passion. This is something that individuals will decide, and this is certainly not something that we can impose to our kids. But by the way of that preparation that I said, we can prepare the way for our kids that inshallah they also someday reach to that way, that's the state of spirituality.
Can I ask a question, please? I have two questions. My first question is that if you are living in a country where you cannot get halal meat, or there's no provision of being able to slaughter the animal, is it okay to eat meat and say Bismillah before it? This is not meat being offered to the gods, but meat which is available in one of the groceries, and this is like you're living in England or America?
Okay. I think I will answer this question in 3 stages. Stage number 1. I think, I mean, I cannot judge about every place, but I think nowadays it is not that difficult really to get halal meat. You know, I think in particular, if you're in the UK, I can tell you there shouldn't really be any problem getting halal meat. I guess this should be pretty much the same for America, although many of you know better. I've been to many places and I found not only halal butchers but also halal restaurants everywhere. I've been even into places that the owners were not Muslims, but still their meat was halal because they would buy from a halal butcher. So first of all, from practical point of view, I think in many cases this will not really apply and this will not happen. That is stage 1. Stage 2, I'm going to answer your question first from the point of view of my teacher, Javed Ahmed Ghamidi. This is Al-Mawrid US event. So I think it is only fair to first share with you the views of my teacher. I think if you ask that question from my teacher, Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, his answer would be that if you cannot get halal meat, which is quite unlikely, but if you cannot get it, and if there is no other way for you to get it from somewhere else, or even legally produce halal meat yourself, then why not trying the option of vegetarian food, and then occasionally also get halal meat? So that can be possibility. Then if you say, well, okay, but I know this person who his health issues, his nutrition issues is such that he really needs to get meat almost every day. He cannot have vegetarian diet for a long time. Then I think the answer that my Ustad will give you, which is based on the Quran, is that, well, if that is the situation, then of course you can have meat as long as it is not pork. Of course you can have the meat, and yeah, it is good to say Bismillah before that, because that will be a situation of istirar, and the Quran has even allowed eating pork in the situation of istirar, let alone a meat that by itself is halal, but the slaughter of it is not halal. That is stage number 2. Stage number 3 of my answer is that I have humbly developed a different understanding after much research on this subject. And I need to emphasize, because this is Al-Mawrid US, that my understanding in this is humbly different from the understanding of my teacher, and he does disagree with me. So please do bear in mind. So what I'm about to say is not the view of my respected teacher, Javed Ahmed Ghamidi. In my understanding, the issue of saying the name is not wajib. I agree with Imam Shafi'i in terms of the point that he makes, that the verses that are talking about saying the name are really going back to the same verse that talks about shirk in terms of doing zibh, which means doing the zibh for idols. So I do not consider saying the name really to be an issue, and I also consider the way that the animal is slaughtered to be enough in terms of blood coming out, whether it is stunned by electricity or not, before slaughtering. So therefore, it is my opinion, my humble opinion, that as long as the meat itself is halal, and as long as it is not slaughtered for any idols, then it is okay to have it. And of course, still it will be very good to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim before having it. And I again say, emphasizing, if somebody is just listening, this is my own humble view. The view of my teacher, Javed Ghamidi, is different from that. He believes that the name should be said, and if it is not said, then the meat will be halal.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. I have Kinza Kashif, and she has put up a question. She wants to know, what are your thoughts on Valentine's Day?
Okay. Now this is the area that I feel a little bit having lack of knowledge. I'm not really expert in all these things, and in the UK they do not celebrate these things as intensively as in America. I mean, even Christmas in the UK is not as intensive as America. You need to correct me, brother, if I'm wrong. As long as I understand, Valentine's Day is a day that you show love to the loved ones and maybe even give some money to charity. If that is the case, then again, I don't see any problem with that. See, it really doesn't matter whether I know what exactly Valentine's Day is or not. The principle remains the same. The principle is that the thing that we are participating in can become haram if one of the following happen. Number one, that event itself actually at this time is is something that is against our religious beliefs. Okay, so for instance, if we were living, let's say, 200 years ago, then I think we should have not participated in Halloween, because that would be actually worshipping Satan and things to do with idols, etc., etc. Okay. The second thing is if something haram is happening in the event. So if there is an event going on, and what is happening there is that boys and girls in an inappropriate way are mixed together, and they're drinking alcohol and lots of inappropriate dance and lots of inappropriate singing, etc. Because of these elements, again, it will become haram. The event itself can be fine if these elements are not there, but because of these elements, it will become haram. If none of these are there, then we are out of the category of halal and haram. We are now in the category of appropriate or not appropriate. And that, as I said, would be up to every individual and every parent to carefully think about it and then decide what is the best thing to do. I think that pretty much applies to Valentine's Day as well. Let me just, something came to my mind, you might find this interesting. Let me give you one example about this appropriate and inappropriate. You see, we have hadith narrated from the Prophet, and it seems to be Sahih hadith, where the Prophet says something to the effect that when your kids get to such and such age, beat them up if they do not pray. Okay? Now, I'm asking you, would you do something like that when you are in America or Britain? Let us assume that the kid will not complain about you. Let us assume that no one will know that, so it won't be seen as domestic violence, etc. Would you beat up your kid if he does not pray? I don't know about you. I never do that. Not because I don't want to hurt my kid. That is also part of it. But the main reason is that if I beat him up for prayer, I'm very sure he will not pray anymore. At least when he's out of my observation, he won't pray. That's it. And I tell you, my kid is not a very rebellious kid. He's a good kid. The era has changed. The time has changed. So see, the advice that at some time would work for that culture 1400 years ago, when Islam was establishing itself in Arabia, at that time it was working. Today, that will not work. That is hadith from the Prophet. Let me even give you a verse of the Quran. Surah An-Nisa advises that if your wife becomes rebellious, advise her, then don't be with her, then beat her up. Yes, okay, we know beating here does not mean a very hard beating, should not be on the head, etc. But it is still beating, right? And then 2 verses after that, God says what is the reason. Islah, bringing peace. So see, at some time, for one particular culture, 1400 years ago, in that place, beating the wife up would help with bringing peace to the family. Do you think that is still helping today? Maybe in some villages in Pakistan and Iran and India it does help. I don't think it will help for more educated families. And I certainly don't think it will help here in Britain or there in America. In fact, what it may cause is for the man to end up in the jail. So there's no peace at all. There's no family at all to have peace then anymore. So we need to understand what the instructions of religion are giving us permanent instructions, what instructions may be temporary one. So the instruction of the Quran, for instance, that says وَجَادَلُهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, discuss with them in the best possible way. That is permanent, leaving it to every individual to decide in what way I can put forward my point here, in what way I can convince my kid, in what way I can bring this information to my kid. This hikmah needs to be there. And as long as our mind has a T like that in our brain, and everything goes to the category of halal and haram, as long as we are thinking like this hikmah will not find any space and any place to be. We need to understand that haram is what is haram by God the Almighty, announced in the Quran, approved by the Sunnah of the Prophet. The rest of it is the area of appropriate, disappropriate. I like it, I don't like it. It is good, it is bad.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. Normally, around this time, when it's about 5 minutes left, I take the last question. But we do have some unanswered questions. And before I move further, wanted to check with you if you might be willing to consider extending by, let's say, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I think you know the answer. Yes, of course.
I still have to ask. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll go to Rafia Khwaja first. She has a question, and then I'll come to Kinza. Kashif has another question. I'll come back to that.
My question is that a Christian, a Muslim boy is allowed to marry a woman from Ahl Kitab, a Jewish woman or a Christian woman. Why is it that a Muslim woman is not allowed to do the same? Is there anything specifically written in the Quran which forbids this? I should be grateful for an answer.
Okay. So basically, if you look at Surah Al-Ma'idah, you will find that God is saying what are the things that are allowed, what are the things that are not allowed. These are some of the last verses of the Quran that was revealed. And then one of the things that God reveals there is about marriage. And what happens there is that there's this verse that talks with male Muslims and tells them that the good women among Ahl al-Kitab hillun lakum, are allowed for you. And then there's a full stop, meaning that there's no mention of a Muslim lady marrying a non-Muslim man from Ahl al-Kitab. So the vast majority of scholars, including my teacher Jabir Ahmed Ahmadi, they have the view that because the Quran has been silenced about it, so therefore it is not allowed. The reason for that, when they talk about it, is that they say that the main issue is that the family needs to be on the basis of Tawheed, monotheism, and on the basis of correct understanding of religion. This needs to be the dominating environment in this family, and something that would then be passed to the kids. And because normally in most families it is man or the father that seems to have a bit more dominating effect on the whole family. And then of course in particular for the society of Arabs, women definitely never had a say in that. It was definitely men who would determine in which way, in which path the family needs to go. So therefore then they say that because of that, the permission has only been given to men and not to women. And in fact, people like Jabir Ahmed Ghamidi even go one step farther than that. And they say that even for the man, he needs to consider this very carefully. And that, for instance, if the man is living in a, let's say, non-Muslim country, where by default it is all all other faiths other than Islam that are dominating the whole culture here, it might not be a very good idea for a man in a non-Muslim country to marry a non-Muslim woman from Ahl al-Kitab, because then that guarantee about which path the family will go will not be there. This is the view of Javed Ahmed Ahmadi, my respected teacher, and majority view. However, I should also say that there is a minority view there as well. I prefer to just let you know what it is and leave the rest for you. The minority view goes by saying that the fact that Quran has not talked about it does not necessarily make it haram, and that the issue really there was not to have the faith of Islam to be dominating faith in the family. The issue simply was to have marriage between people who in principle do believe in God. And as long as the woman makes sure that her non-Muslim husband will not gradually impose his faith on her, then it is okay for that woman also to marry with a non-Muslim man. However, I should say this is the view of very, very, very minority of scholars, and the view of the vast majority of them, like 99.9% of them, including Javed Ahmed Ahmadi, is that this is not allowed. Men can only marry a non-Muslim from Ahl al-Kitab, and I explained the reason for you as well.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. I have a question from Kenza Kashif, and she wants to know, we're living in US, and as a working woman, can you shake hands with men?
This is one of those things that, again, I would say will not go under the area of halal and haram. Will go under the area of appropriate and inappropriate. In principle, I think it is better for man and woman to, in principle, not to shake hands. But really, if you think about it, the main reason that we say that, it is not because if the hand of man and woman touch each other, something will happen in up there in the heavens, and then some sort of crime will be assigned for me. It is not like that. It is more realistic than that. The reason it might be inappropriate is that in the case that this shaking hand would cause any, inappropriate thought and perhaps even further consequences after that. Now, you're living in a non-Muslim country, I'm living in a non-Muslim country. I think you agree with me if I say that normally this is not the case. Shaking hand here is totally simple. I don't think in practice, anyone by shaking hand of a lady or a man, or a lady shaking hand with a man, I don't think really something inappropriate is happening in between. So therefore, I would say that although from religious culture point of view, we may say that it is not quite appropriate, but in principle, I wouldn't say that it is not permissible. I think it is okay to do that, as long as, of course, there is no fear or worry of any inappropriate consequences coming after it.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, and I will ask them separately just to keep the answers separate. My first question is, you answered a lot of questions about practicing religious festivals of non-Muslims. In the same realm, what is the status of practicing or celebrating the Urs of dead Sufi saints that is very typical in Southeast Asia?
Okay, I need to ask you to explain your question a little bit, but before that, just one thing. You said that I've said there's nothing wrong with participating in religious celebrations of other people. I don't think I've said that. I don't consider Valentine's Day or Halloween to be religious festivals. To be honest with you, I don't even consider Christmas to be a religious festival, at least in the places that I know. If it is really a religious festival, then my question would be that why a member of another religion wants to come and participate in a religious festival of a different religion? I mean, okay, maybe it's an interfaith event or open day event, that's fine, but in normal circumstances, why is this going to happen? Does a Christian comes and participate in the Eid al-Fitr festival? I don't think so. So the answer that I gave you was with my understanding that none of these are really religious festivals. Because as soon as you say it is a religious festival, then the question would be, okay, so what is that religion? What exactly this festival, in what way this festival links itself to that religion? And then we need to look at it that way. As far as I see, none of these are really religious festivals. Now, let me hear, please, your question about Sufi festivals. Can you please elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. I think what I meant was exactly what you said, and I used the wrong word, religion or religious. Coming to the question that I asked, in Southeast Asia, especially in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the graves of Sufi saints or the tombs have caretakers, and every year on the death anniversary of these Sufi saints, there's a huge celebration that is conducted, and a lot of people take part in that, being Muslims. What is your thought on something like that?
If this is done with the claim and argument that this is part of the original religion that the Almighty gave us as Islam, then it will become bid'ah, and therefore we should not participate in that, because it will be bid'ah. If such a claim is not being made, but still there are beliefs that these beliefs are not in line with our beliefs that we get from the Quran, like for instance, if you come and participate in this celebration, I don't know, God will forgive you, or God will answer your prayers, or something like that, again I would advise against it, because again this time it may not be technically bid'ah, but then it will be something that is against the principles that we have in the Quran. If it is none of these, and this is just sort of cultural celebration, perhaps to remind themselves about how good this person was, and reminding themselves about his stories, and maybe in an appropriate way, maybe singing something together, etc., then in that case I wouldn't consider it to be any problem there.
Thank you. My last question is, again, from the perspective, I'm from India, so I have a lot of friends who are non-Muslim, particularly Hindu. So in the context of living with Hindus in India, and even in the US, we have lots of Hindu friends that have festivals where they do, for example, worship of girls, or a girl has to do certain tasks to complete that worship. They often ask Muslim friends to borrow their children, girl children, and because for them, they do not care if the child is Hindu or Muslim, as long as they have a girl child to complete that prayer. Although we do not believe in this practice as Muslims, from the perspective of Islam, how does agreeing to have your children participate affect you as a Muslim, and what should our practice be as Muslims?
So they borrow the girl to worship the girl? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Right. Well, I would say that is definitely not something that a Muslim needs to do. I would say we need to avoid that. It is very much like participating in prayers with Christian that is calling Jesus. So I won't think that this is something that we need to do. Not that you talked about Hindus, let me also say one thing here, and perhaps just encouragement for our brothers and sisters and myself to think about this a little bit more. Sometimes we Muslims seem to have lots of difficulties when thinking about the, for instance, Hinduism religion, because we consider it to be not exactly Ahl al-Kitab. I would like to invite you to consider this, that if you ask most Hindus, you know, do you believe in one God or more than one God? I think most of them will say, or many of them that I have been in touch with, would say, no, we only have one God. What then happens is that between that one God and themselves, they have many, many gods. But then again, this seems to be quite, in a way, similar to some of the other biases that we see in some of the Ahl al-Kitab, and even including some of the Muslims as well. I want to encourage you to think about this fact, that the only reason that the word Hindu, for instance, was not being used in the Quran was that Arabs did not know them. It is as simple as that. Arabs at the time only knew Jews and Christians and Sabaeans and to some extent Majus. And these are the only groups that have been mentioned in the Quran because the primary addressees of the Quran were Arabs at that time. So the fact that Hindus are not being mentioned in the Quran does not mean that they are ignored and they should not be thought about and we should not have any link with them. God knows better. But my humble opinion, and it is only my humble opinion, I'm not saying that I'm getting this from Hadith or Quran or anything. My humble opinion is that if, for instance, there were Hindus in Arabia, they will also be considered as Ahl al-Kitab. Because think about it, when the Quran says, لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ هَادٍ, for each nation there is a guide, and it talks about before Prophet. So I'm asking you, who was the God? Who was the Prophet for Hindus? Look at their history. Who was the Prophet? And this might be one of the reasons that, for instance, my teacher, Javed Ahmed Ghamezi, believes that Hinduism originally seems to be a monotheism religion. Maybe an authentic religion, but one that was changed a lot during the history. I just thought sharing that with you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. We still have a few questions, and we have about 4 minutes left. Farhan Sayed has a question, and I'll try and see if he can ask on the mic himself, because I think it refers to a verse of Quran that just by the numbers, so maybe he can elaborate it. Farhan, you can ask the question if you like, please.
I think, Shoaib, you got me mixed up with somebody else. I did not raise my hand for question yet, and I don't have any Quran verse to...
Thank you. I see another Farhan Sayed, so let me check.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Farhan Sayed, you can ask your question. Are you there?
Ji, Assalamu alaikum.
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum.
I want to ask you, how do you interpret 9:121? Please answer if possible. It's not the topic, but
9:121?
Yes, right. Correct.
Brother, just to make sure that I'm getting it right, could you please read the Arabic or even English translation for me, just to make sure?
Yeah, La taqulu mimma lam yazkur ismallahi alayh.
Oh, you said 9:121.
Right.
I think you are talking about Ma'idah, perhaps. Okay, I know which verse you are talking about. لا تأكلوا مما لم يذكر اسم الله عليه. I think, brother, you are referring to that view that I expressed. Well, this is exactly the point. I shared the view of Imam Shafi'i with you. Imam Shafi'i has an argument here. His argument is that look at this verse very carefully. Let me find the verse just to make sure that I can talk about those words exactly for you. Okay, so brother, this is verse 121 in Surah An'am. وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يُذْكَرِ اسْمُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَإِنَّهُ لَفِسْقٌ وَإِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ لَيُوحُونَ إِلَىٰ أَوْلِيَائِهِمْ لِيُجَادِلُوكُمْ وَإِنْ أَطَعْتُمُوهُمْ إِنَّكُمْ لَمُشْرِكُونَ. So the argument that Imam Shafi'i has, and I try to expand that argument a bit and add a little bit of my own understanding to it as well, is that first of all, if you look at other verses that are talking about what is forbidden for us, only 4 categories are mentioned. In fact, at the beginning of this very chapter, only 4 categories are mentioned, and it starts by saying only these things are haram for you. Okay? So then it will become a bit curious and a bit of a puzzle that why, when in a number of places God says these 4 are haram for you, then suddenly a 5th criteria appears here. Then comes Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i says, look at this verse. Number 1, it says, if you follow shayateen in doing this, you will be among mushrikun. Then Imam Shafi'i argues. He says that, okay, if you eat from something that name of God is not mentioned to it, at most we can say that you have committed a sin. But how you can become a mushrik by doing that? Mushrik has a definition. Then he says, look at the word fisq. And then if you go to the Surah Ma'idah and earlier in Surah An'am, you will say that in the same place that it says, don't eat from what has been slaughtered for other than God, it says innahu lafisq. The word fisq again is repeated there. From there, Imam Shafi'i argues and concludes that therefore lam yuzkar ismullah alayh here actually refers to the same thing. The thing is, at the time of Arabs, 1400 years ago, people were so much devoted to their idols that they would say the name of their idols almost for anything that they would slaughter. So therefore, not saying name of God by default would mean saying the name of the idols. So therefore, Imam Shafi'i says this actually refers to the same thing, and therefore he considers that saying the name is not wajib, it is sunnah. But now that you ask me, again, for those who have just joined us, I need to say this is opinion of Imam Shafi'i. I find it to be reasonable. I find myself in agreement with this. But my respected teacher, Javed Ahmad Ahmadi, disagrees with that. He does consider us saying the name to be wajib. Brother, I am happy to stay for another 10 minutes if there is any more question.
Oh, okay. So we'll take one more question, and this will be the last question, and after that I'll conclude.
Okay.
Rafia Khwaja, she has another question, so we'll go with her.
My question is that, what do you think of people who go to milads and keep singing naats on either Milad al-Nabi or occasions like this? And the other question is that people go to the tombs of saints and then pray to the saint to grant them a child or other financial problems that have to be solved. Is wrong?
Okay. So the sister is asking, what do I think about people who go to the Milad al-Nabi and perhaps sing something there, and also what I think about people who go to the tombs and ask from the saints in those tombs to grant them children and to grant their wishes. Sister, if you ask me what do I think about those people, I cannot comment about that, because it is not for me or for you or for anybody to judge individuals. What I know, almost sure, is that all those people are very sincere in what they are doing. They really believe that this is the correct way of doing it, and I hope, inshallah, that God will even reward them for what they are doing. So don't ask me what do I think about these people. Let me adjust your question or polish your question. I think what you're asking me is that whether these acts are correct or not. Then my answer will be definitely not. The second one being worse than the first one. So Milad al-Nabi, you see, first of all, we need to define what do we mean by Eid Milad al-Nabi. If we say, look, every year at the day that seems to us on the basis of reports that to be the anniversary of birth of the Prophet, let us, for instance, spread some brochures about the life of the Prophet. Let us have a conference, a seminar on the Prophet. Let us have some programs in TV to teach us more about the Prophet. If it is about this, I don't have any problem with that. I think it is actually a very good thing to do. However, if we say that it is Milad al-Nabi, as Muslims, we should celebrate this, we should gather together, we should do some ritual things because it is our duty, we are Muslims, and inshallah we will get reward for it, then that will be the borderline of bid'ah. I'm asking you and anyone who considers Milad al-Nabi to be something that we need to do, give me the name of one companion of the Prophet, one of them, who celebrated Eid Milad al-Nabi. And do we consider them to be in less love with the Prophet compared to us? I don't think so. Do we know any of the members of Ahl al-Bayt of the Prophet who would celebrate the Milad of the Prophet? I don't think so. So that will become the borderline of bid'ah. As for the second one, going to a tomb and asking the saint for something, I'm afraid that is shirk. I wouldn't call the person himself to be mushrik, because I'm sure if I ask him, is this saint your God, he will say no. So I will not consider that person to be mushrik. But the act, unfortunately, is the act of shirk. That should not be done. If there are any saints, whatever that means, the way that we can benefit from them is to learn from their life, read about their life. If we find something good in their life, then try to look at that as role models, trying to follow that pattern. That would be the way that we benefit from the saints. But when God himself says, As'aluni, ask me, astajib lakum, I will answer you, why should we go and ask somebody else? That would be my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. I did say that that was the last question, but you've been so kind. So if I can take one more, and this will really be the last question. Farheen, please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rahim and Shakib Bhai. My question was in relation to something I wanted to understand better of what you said earlier. As living in the West, we sometimes have to go and attend funerals for our friends who may not be Muslim. And this can be Christian friends, Jewish friends, or Hindu friends. In those particular instances, whether they're in a church or in a temple, there are some verses of their religious texts that are said, some prayers done, and we are there as friends, just to lend support. What is your thought about that in terms of a Muslim attending such events?
In principle, I don't find any problem with that. In fact, if it is a friend, if it is a neighbor, if it is somebody who you know, it will become your duty and your responsibility to attend such ceremonies. And I've been to some of these ceremonies myself. Many of the things that they are saying, or in fact, to be honest with you, as far as I see, all of the things that they have said to me was all right, because it was all about God and heaven and things like that. So of course I'm talking about church. So many of the things that they are saying, maybe we would say it in a different form, maybe we would use different terminologies, but in principle the core message is the same. But even if the core message is not the same, even if they say something that goes directly against our religion, everybody there knows that you are a Muslim, and everybody knows that you're there only to pay your respects to your friend or to your neighbor. Everybody understands that. Everybody appreciates that. You yourself know that you are there, and that doesn't mean that you are having the same faith as them. And God the Almighty also knows that. So I don't think there is anything wrong with that.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. If there is still any questions left, you can go to Dr. Abdullah Rahim's website, exploring-islam.com, and you can put the question there. I'm sure Dr. Rahim will be glad to answer that. In concluding our today's session, I once again would like to thank everyone for coming and Dr. Rahim for making time for this session. Please keep checking our Facebook page and Al-Mawrid.us.org website for details on any upcoming sessions, video releases, scholar visits, and other Al-Mawrid news. You can also subscribe to our Al-Mawrid US mailing list if you wish. You can go to our website, almawridus.org. To do that, you just have to click on the mailing list link, and that would allow you to provide us with your name and email address, and we will keep you on the notification list, and you will hear from us time to time and know about these events beforehand. Thank you again, and Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.